connect to that screen.
Are you sharing screen?
Oh, there you
Okay, there you go. But this is on YouTube. There you go. Are you sharing?
Yes, I am sure.
You're sharing. Okay. Well, where's on the side? Okay, there you go.
There you go.
Okay.
All right, very good. Okay. So again, my name is Craig Rosenblum. I'm the president of HiMed. As Jenny said, also serve on the board for 3D Heals. And today I'd like to talk to everyone about building the future, the role of materials in advancing additive manufacturing. So just to give a brief introduction to HiMed, HiMed is a contract manufacturer. We're a biomaterials company based in Old Bethpage, New York. And ultimately, we specialize in the manufacture of different biomaterials, and we use those materials to provide surface treatments. So we've been in business for 30 years, and to be perfectly honest, 3D and this scope is really something that we're involved in now, as everyone is, but our company was founded 3 decades ago, prior to anyone knowing anything about 3D printing. But ultimately, materials are what matters, and that's really what I want to drive home in this conversation. We speak about AI, we speak about different buzzwords now related to how we can enhance 3D printing in orthopedics. But at the end of the day, whether it's materials in traditional forms or materials in newer 3D forms, a company like HiMed, specializing specifically in different calcium phosphates, we have the ability to manufacture these materials and lend themselves to these interesting applications. So once again, the materials matter. I always find it interesting when someone reaches out to HiMed and they say, can you help us with 3D printing hydroxyapatite, or do you supply hydroxyapatite? Not only do we supply hydroxyapatite, but there's a variety of different forms, right? Different types of powders, different morphologies, different chemistries. There's different types of calcium phosphates, the greater type of material. And as you can see here, the morphology certainly is going to be different, and ultimately the application is going to be what drives the type of material. So when I first started at HiMed some 9-10 years ago, titanium plasma spray coating was very prevalent. In fact, HiMed had established a patented process for being able to perform this process in atmospheric conditions. And I found great joy, of course, in being able to apply this type of coating. But by the time that we got to the finish line and being able to offer a very complex process in an atmosphere environment, no one else was running the race, right? We were the only ones that were in that contest, of course, because what happened is that now you can easily additively manufacture many of these in a fraction of the time for a fraction of the cost. But with that being said, regardless of the form, once again, sticking to the theme of this conversation, the materials matter. So there was an interesting study based in England some 5 years ago, thereabouts, and this was the first study that explored the types of acetabular cups. Of course, these are orthopedic hip implants, and the observation here was to evaluate under scanning electron microscopy how different methods produced different types of morphologies under magnification. So, for example, regardless of the method of manufacture, you'll notice that there's a high presence of residual beads throughout. And several years ago, Jenny and 3D Heals hosted a really interesting event, recognizing the need for post-processing. I think everyone now in the scope of additive manufacturing identifies why post-processing is important, but there's still maybe some uncertainty as far as how to go about post-processing, right? The idea of being able to print and then immediately go into surgery is certainly desirable, but at the same time, things need to happen in order to make sure that these beads do not fall off in vivo, right? These beads, regardless of the method of manufacture, are partially molten, loosely adherent residual beads, and it's certainly a concern. And we've seen just putting an as-printed acetabular cup in just an ultrasonic DI water bath, and the bead certainly will fall off, and that's certainly a concern. So at a higher magnification, once again, without any form of post-processing, the clusters of partially molten and loosely adherent residual beads can potentially be released in vivo. The question now is, recognizing the value for post-processing, many folks in the industry use aluminum oxide, right? Aluminum oxide certainly has been around for grit blast environments for many years. For those of you that are not familiar with grit blasting, it's quite simply being able to propel these residual, or excuse me, to propel this media at high pressures towards the substrate. And ultimately what happens is that the aluminum oxide effectively knocks off the residual beads. And certainly you can see that that's the case. But the unfortunate occurrence is that in place of beads being littered throughout the surface, you have a bioincompatible aluminum oxide throughout the surface. And that's going to inhibit bone growth, and that's certainly not desired for implants that ultimately are going to be going inside of a human body. So what we have done at HiMed is that we have a material, a calcium phosphate, an apatitic abrasive, marketed as MCD apatitic abrasive. And the value for MCD is that because it's a calcium phosphate, it's soluble. So we can perform this bead blasting, and following the blasting, all of the residuals are simply dissolved away because it's a calcium phosphate. So we'll perform a post-passivation to remove the beads. We can be very intentional with the size of the media in order to knock away the beads throughout the surface. But this is something that's been very popular, and we've had many successful collaborations with many folks that we'll all be seeing tomorrow at the conference. So this is one area of how HiMed has been involved in on the additive side. And it's something that I find quite interesting in the sense that the MCD blasting conventionally was simply used to roughen the surface prior to the application of a coating, much like the titanium plasma spray coating, which I had spoken about earlier. But now we're able to find a solution for a new problem using a pre-existing material, simply applying the material and applying the process in a different manner based on the needs in this problem. The second area of additive manufacturing that I'd like to speak about is a very new partnership that we formed in July. Those of you might be familiar with the company Lithos. Lithos is a bioceramic company. Specifically, they manufacture 3D printers capable of printing different types of ceramics. Specifically, again, HiMed, we're interested in hydroxyapatite and tricalcium phosphate. And the goal of this partnership is being able to use our materials to ultimately create bioinks, which are more consistent as far as how the material performs. And ultimately, we can hopefully produce different complex shapes, different porosities, different functions for many orthopedic applications. So again, this is a pretty new technology. I have to admit, last week, I attended Additive Manufacturing Strategies. It was a really popular event in New York, and everyone's talking about metal 3D printing and polymeric 3D printing. And the number of people that came back to me and said, wait, you could do that? Right? And this is a show that's dedicated just to additive manufacturing. So I do recognize that this is a newer technology. As the name Lithos suggests, it's a lithography-based 3D printing mechanism. So there's 4 steps to simplify the process. One would design a CAD file of the device that you're looking to print, and then ultimately a rendering of that image is cast through the software that we have, and we're able to print layer by layer. There's a projector system in the bottom portion of this printer, and ultimately based on the way that that image portrays, one can take the device and be able to print consecutive layers, and over a number of different iterations, we can print. I realize I'm covering the final product in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, but this, of course, would be an orthopedic screw that was 3D printed, in this case with hydroxyapatite. But one might be interested in printing with a biphasic calcium phosphate, where perhaps there's a gradient along the screw depending on where the more stable hydroxyapatite would be desired, as opposed to a tricalcium phosphate, which is going to be more resorbable. So there's a lot of interesting technology that could come about from this. In fact, Lithos, they just released a dual-headed printer, and you have the ability to print with multiple materials. Currently, when I describe biphasic calcium phosphate, say 70-30%, I'm talking about, say, taking 70% HA, 30% of beta TCP, mix them up, and then you have one homogeneous solution. But now the idea of being able to have two separate vats with two printer heads, and to more clearly define what everyone is looking at, this is the print stage, and it dips inside of this vat. This vat has a slurry, and this cylindrical column is where the ink would be dispensed from. So again, HiMed, I certainly am learning the technology as everyone else is, but where HiMed and specifically our team is introduced to this process, it's being able to create inks that perform consistently from batch to batch. The concern for many folks that are highly invested in this type of technology is that they might be able to print one screw, but how do you print hundreds of screws, thousands of screws, right? And for that matter, before we could print hundreds of screws, we're printing one screw initially. And I think that's where the AI comes in, as far as being able to be more predictive for types of forms, if it's a porous form, if it's a solid form, what types of structures or perhaps platform stages might be needed in order to ensure that the material is properly adhered to the build plate. Oops. And of course, there is some level of post-processing still needed for a process like this. So again, it's a bioceramic 3D printer, but it functions where the yellow corresponds to ceramic, the blue circles correspond to a photopolymer, so essentially a binder, which makes it that viscous slurry, think of, say, a warm honey. And then following a sintering process, we're able to remove the photopolymer, and then afterwards ultimately have a homogeneous bioceramic. And of course, one can incorporate the shrinkage into the final device. So this is very new, right? This is a very new technology, but again, from a HiMed's perspective, materials are really what's going to drive this process. I think the materials and being able to provide high quality materials with a high degree of consistency, with creative ways and creative applications that maybe in the past we were not able to find successful solutions for. But this is something that, you know, we're quite excited about. My final slide, I have a QR code for those of you that are interested in learning more about the partnership. And I'd be happy to, I guess, at the very end of the session, answer any questions.
Yes, because of the unique format of this event, we will save all the questions to the end. So we'll move on to the next speaker. And for the people who are virtually, please enter who you are, your name, what you're looking for, and we'll give you a shout out. Okay, you'll be famous in this room. All right, so our next speaker is going to be Jen. He is the product manager from Synopsys Simpleware. Come here. I've known this company for, I would say, many years, since the start of 3D Heals. So let me open your presentation here. Okay, that's your presentation. Suck. Lumen. Yeah. Did you put this together in SFO in the airport?
No.
It says. All right.
It's all well prepared weeks in advance. Let's see. So how do I get to the presentation here?
Share screen.
Share screen. There we go. All right. Okay, so my name is Karim Gench. I'm a product manager for Synopsys, part of the Simpleware group. So yeah, here the idea is leveraging AI to convert 3D images into models for patient-specific workflows. So thanks to everybody for hosting us. Thank you, Jenny, for inviting me to give a quick little talk here. So just a quick overview of who we are. So we're the Simpleware product group. So we develop image processing software. So 3D images to models. That's our focus, that's what we know, and that's what we tend to stick to. And that's kind of the main takeaway from what we do. So we have dedicated sales, support, services teams globally. We're part of Synopsys. Synopsys is, they're down in Sunnyvale. They're a $6 billion company, and we're a small part of that. We're originally just Simpleware. We were acquired by Synopsys in 2016. And it's my background is I used Simpleware when I was in grad school. It was a small startup out of the UK in Exeter, and they hired me to start the US based office, and US Canada Go were my instructions. And I kind of went. I literally didn't know what the software cost for the first 3 months, but I figured it out, and here we are. So just to give you an idea of the image-based modeling workflow, the idea here is going from processing images from CT or MRI scans of patients, and then going through a process called segmentation or labeling, depending on how you want to describe that, generating a model, having some analysis and reporting within the software. So what we do is within this gray area here, and then we export these models out for, these are kind of our 3 main applications: implants, guides, and surgical planning, point of care 3D printing, or in silico clinical trials. So in silico clinical trials, that's more R&D based, simulation based applications within companies. Point of care 3D printing, that's typically 3D printing of anatomical structures, sometimes guides, sometimes devices closer to the point of care or at the point of care within hospitals. And then implants, guides, and surgical planning are typically orthopedic OEMs, things like that, who are doing patient-specific planning, guides, things like that. So we are a software company. We license our software off the shelf that people can install and use. And we also have customization where we leverage AI tools to automate workflows and provide solutions for our customers. So kind of the first level of automation, or second level of automation, first is just scripting within our tool, but we have off-the-shelf AI tools that we have included with our software that people can license for these different anatomies: hip, basically ankle, knee, CT, MRI, hip, shoulder, CMF, heart. We have more in the pipeline. So these are just off-the-shelf tools where we acquire data, trained our AI models, and deploy it within the software. And this can be used to help automate some of your processes. So typically these work pretty well. It's segmentation and landmarking that's done automatically. But with some of our larger customers, they start off with this, they like it, but they say, you know what, well, we actually need these landmarks, these additional anatomies. So that's where we move into our higher level of automation. And this is where we do a complete end-to-end automation solution for our customers. So it can literally be any anatomy. They come to us about a year ago. We deployed a shoulder solution. We had an OEM who had a very well-established workflow for shoulder planning. And however, some of the processes, the segmentation, the landmarking, some of the design was pretty manual. So we worked with them and we developed an automated AI tool, and we were able to bring something that took about 30+ minutes down to 5. And when you're talking about 100 cases a day, that's a significant time savings. So it's a high value solution that we offer. I personally enjoy it more because you work very, very closely with the customer. It's very sticky, and you become part of their workflow at manufacturing. The one we're allowed to talk about is Corin. So Corin has the optimized positioning system. So this is a hip implant where they actually take a CT scan of the patient's hip, knee, and ankle, and they've been customers of ours for about 10 years, 11 years now, and they started off doing some pretty manual processes, did some scripting, sped it up, and then we were able to deploy AI solutions and speed it up about 94% for their workflow. So it really helped speed along the process. Kind of a funny story is I visited their engineers, and at first I was feeling a little guilty because we just deployed this AI tool that's kind of taken away their jobs, but they were very thankful because nobody likes segmentation. People are typically overqualified for segmentation, and doing that process is you have to do it constantly, but there's no real room to grow because you want these people who are good at segmentation to only be doing segmentation. So it's one of those things where it's been a solution that's been welcomed by our customers. So just to kind of give a recap of what we offer is we have our off-the-shelf tool, which is FDA CE marked, FDA cleared, CE marked, and it's kind of, when you're establishing your workflow, you're doing anywhere between 1 to 100 data sets a year, kind of doing this workflow, converting images to models and then going off to your process. Then we have scripting that helps you speed certain processes up, maybe up the number of cases. And then we have these off-the-shelf tools. That's where you're getting into the hundreds. And then custom modeler. This is when you're dealing to hundreds or thousands of cases, and really having a pipeline of processes that you're doing. And then we can really help to automate that for you. So just to kind of give you into, I've got some little examples within these three kinds of areas. Again, this was this process with Corin. So this is the optimized positioning system. So you get your patient imaging, you bring it in, they own the workflow. So all the image data is sent to Corin, they bring it in, they do their analysis. It's all powered by our tools in the background. They develop they design cutting guides, a surgical plan that's deployed on the cloud, and then the device. So they send that to the surgeon, and then they're off to surgery. So currently they're at about 600 patients a month. I think that might be higher by now, but it's off and running, and it's been a big success, and we're happy to share the news about it. But really, it's been a process. You really it's a process on the legal front because it's a mixture of our IP and their IP and kind of the symbiotic relationship with the customer. And it's really a process to learn more about their data, more about what they have and how they can leverage that and automate their workflow. So we had our initial version back in 2020, and we reduced the time per case by about 80%. And then they were happy with that. That was well above their expectation at the time. But then as the process sped up, they could grow more and take on more patients. And then they saw more variability within those patients. And though that variability fell outside of their training for the AI tool, so they needed to retrain. So we retrained the tool, added more data sets, and we were able to bring it down by about 94%. And this is an ongoing process, an ongoing relationship with our customer. As they grow, we help keep that speed and automation high. So that's where it's being deployed currently. It's being done in production. These companies are getting it FDA cleared. Kind of a newer area is the point of care 3D printing. This is more anatomical 3D printing in the hospital. It really depends on the hospital. I was just visiting the San Francisco VA and also the UCSF here. They have their 3D printing labs, but it's because there's a clinician who really believes in it, and they're able to get funding and hire like an engineer, if they're lucky, maybe a second one, but typically not. And they're just really trying to pump out these models, but they're printing things from, all sorts of applications, cardiovascular, oncology, orthopedic, all sorts of different applications. So it's really tough to scale. When you're dealing with 100 shoulders, that's something you can scale really well. So this is an example with Nicholas Children's Hospital. We have this great, it's called Roy's Story. If you want to Google it, it's, they put together these videos that, I'm a dad now, and it's all about kids and how 3D printing at the point of care affects care. But this is an example. This was a 16-year-old with some heart defects, and they used our AI tool and 3D printing toolkit to do it all within the software. Typically, this would take about 2 hours to do. With our off-the-shelf tools, they did it in about 15 minutes, so saved a ton of time and got it printed right away and got it to the surgeon to help with the patient. And it's one part of the 3D printing. I know this isn't an orthopedic example, but a lot of what helps is bringing down the anxiety of parents and patients, showing this is your child's heart, this is what I'm going to be doing. So it gives them confidence that they know what's going on, the surgeons know what's going on, they have a better idea of what's happening. And this reduction in general anxiety has good clinical outcomes as well. At first I kind of didn't think too much about that, but as I speak to more and more of these clinicians, you really see some of those effects. So that's at the point of care. And then the new area for us, which we really see as the future, is in silico trials. So this is where you're leveraging simulation for virtual human digital twin. So instead of doing clinical trials on patients, on a cohort of patients, say of 300 patients, you'll do it on 30, and the rest of the patients, you'll do virtual simulations on those. And so this is work we've been doing a lot with ANSYS, is a simulation tool company. Again, sorry, this isn't an orthopedic example, but I have one right after here. But really, again, you have your image data, Synopsys provides a tool to go from image to a model that can be sent into something like ANSYS. And this is where you can simulate blood flow, electromagnetic simulation, mechanical loading, all of that, those different types of multi-physics that they can do and do in silico trials and really reduce the cost and time to get these medical devices to market. So that's really the future that we see with that. And a good example of that here is an orthopedic example of, again, it's a similar workflow that you always see, but it's just different output. So again, you generate your models, you can position the device, you can generate simulation-ready meshes in Simpleware. We send it into ANSYS. They have the PyAnsys, which is another tool that they're developing with Python integration. And then, for example, here you can simulate the mechanical loading within the hip joint and really, this is typically has been historically done in R&D, but with a lot of our AI solution, a lot of statistical shape modeling that we've been doing to generate these synthetic data sets, populations of data, we're kind of reducing the bottleneck on one end, while the other end, ANSYS is working to reduce the bottlenecks of building these simulations, which it could take a few days to run a single simulation, but that time is coming down. So working together, we're able to bring these into a much more streamlined workflow. And the idea is simulation by the bedside. That's the long-term vision. That's the long-term goal of these types of applications. So with that, also, we're investing in the future. We have the Simpleware University Bundle. We used to sell, software to academics directly. Now with Synopsys, they're more in the semiconductor space, a lot of the onshoring, the CHIPS Act, they want to train new people. So we've kind of piggybacked onto that. And we're basically, giving 50 licenses for $1,500 a year to academics, really just trying to invest in academia, invest in the next generation of users and reduce those barriers and provide these tools to academics and clinical researchers who are doing this work. And obviously, from our point of view, makes sense to get more users and make it a more ubiquitous tool. So with that, I hope I didn't speak too much. I'm done. Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
Awesome. Let's see. Okay. Well, one person who said a shout out. Okay, we'll keep the question at the end. But the order of addressing the question will be the virtual audience first. So put your question in the QA box, and then we'll go for the live audience, and nobody's going to be recorded because copyright situation. Okay. So, Elisa, do you have your presentation on that computer? Okay, awesome. So I'm going to introduce our next speaker, who is a CEO and founder for Illuminate, Elisa Hoffman.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining.
So unmute and then share screen. There we go.
I got the share screen right. Okay. All right. There we go. Are we good?
Why is this always?
You have to stop your share.
I'm not sure. I am viewing yours, but this is not. Hold on a second. Let me just do something here. Okay. So there you go.
All right. Go team. Okay. My name is Elisa Huffman, CEO, founder, and inventor of Illuminate Products. What you're going to notice here is there's a few segments of this. This is a startup. We're raising money. We're starting our Series A. Lisa Turk down at the end of the table. She's our banker with US Capital Global. It's exciting times. So we have an opportunity. What I'm going to talk to you about is our commercialization side. However, we do have a licensing side to our business. So I want you to think about the context here. So has anybody in the room had issues with a spine fusion? Have you somebody that close to you that has had a spine fusion and has experienced debilitating issues, or dental implant rejections, or infections of the bone after a catastrophic trauma issue? I want you to think about that in the context, because we're bringing for the first time therapeutics into hardware. That's the goal here. And we want to partner with companies and test their biologics through our hardware. So that's the third part of this. So we have the commercialization of the one product that I believe is going to change everything about how spine fusions are performed. And then we have our licensing opportunities with big companies like Dean, whom you'll meet. And we also have the studies that we want to prove about what our hardware is. So our proprietary hardware, we have 6 patents filed. We have several in the works as well. We are taking what we know about bone. There's thousands and thousands of papers on this. This is not new. But what it is the combination is new, and the idea and the concepts behind it of why why we have issues. So if you think about it, you're sitting in, I don't know how many people in the room have ever been in a case with bone, but there are some patients where you can literally push a pin into their bone with your thumb. And what I noticed was in my career as working in sales and distribution, throughout the body, there were some places that experienced hardware failure more than others. And spine fusion was one of them. The screws back out and the rods break. That is the number one and number 2 reason for hardware failure. And so what I did was I sketched out an idea over time in 2009 and started to do a lot of research throughout the years. And what I came to found was Dr. Zadpour in 2020 published a paper that said the trabecular pattern of bone is significantly different in the spine, in vertebral bone, than anywhere else in the body. And what a lot of publishers, researchers are studying now is the curvature. The curvature of bone, trabecular patterns of bone are different, more so than anywhere else in the body, in the vertebral bone, but it's also different in femoral head. It's different anywhere in the body. So now we're starting to get really scientific here. So what we've done, and I'll dabble in this really quickly, but bringing in therapeutics can help strengthen bone. So if you think about the inner body and the spine, they take bone chips and they mix it with blood, or they mix it with saline, or if they want the best quality, they mix it with bone marrow or bone marrow aspirate concentrate. And then you have the stem cells that are now touching the bone, because stem cells are chameleons. So if the stem cells are now touching bone, they turn into better bone. And so I'm going to share a little. So here, this is Dr. Zadpour's study. So as you can see, if you're putting on this big TV on a wall, and you're looking here and you're going femoral bone, iliac crest bone, or lumbar bone, which wall would you choose to put that TV on? It's definitely not going to be lumbar bone. So this is my uncle. This is the story of why I designed this. I saw him experience 6 different fusions. He's on his 7th fusion. And the only reason why he can't have the 7th fusion right now is his bone is mashed potatoes. But guess what? Somebody was willing to put him in hardware in him. And I talked him out of it. I said, if your bone is mashed potatoes, like it was in the last one, and like it was on the one before that, how in the world do you expect a better outcome? And so he's in treatment right now. Only 50% of surgeons actually do DEXA scans. DEXA scans are not the best at defining the structural integrity of bone, but at least they're doing it. So the number one reason, as I said before, is the screws back out and the rods break. And this is the most debilitating and the most expensive orthopedic procedure you can have. And it's debilitating for the family and for the patient as well. This is our first commercialized product. This is where we believe that we're going to do the greatest global good. This is a pedicle screw. Literally, the marketing campaign is why not? If we're changing nothing about surgical technique, We're changing nothing about preoperative, postoperative care, and we're changing nothing about cost. Then we're simply providing options that never before existed inside hardware and in the bone. And we're delivering therapeutics through the implant. Why not use the product? So you'll notice here, this is a trabecular pattern of bone. You'll notice that you can draw and inject through the device. It's titanium, and it's designed, as you screw in the screw, it harvests the autograft, it harvests the bone within the device. So here's Bill Walsh over in Australia. He's our advisor and leading researcher. You'll notice that we're drawing bone marrow. The highest quantity of stem cells in the body are in the vertebral bone. And so what we do is inject, or we draw up, and then we re-inject. Most surgeons, in fact, all of them that I've ever spoken with, they're not going to take the 30 minutes out of the time to concentrate or out of the OR to concentrate the actual bone marrow. But what they will do is they'll take a few seconds and draw the bone marrow up and then re-inject. And now we have the gold standard. We have stem cells now touching freshly harvested autograft within the device. So the most complex Gaussian curves have demonstrated better formation of bone, better formation of bone mineral density, stronger, they fill in faster, and they fill into the scaffolds. And you'll notice the more complex the pattern is, the better the outcomes. And there are several studies that are demonstrating this. So number one, we're developing a new category of therapeutic hardware. We anticipate this was the next generation of spine fusion development. Our initial target market are costly revision surgeries. The reason why is because that's where we could do the greatest global good. That gives the surgeons an option that never before existed. And revision surgeries, they don't have any available options other than what's currently on the market. So this gives them the ability to not have to pre-plan before a surgery, and they can go in and say, oh no, there's a lesion here that I wasn't aware of. Bring me the calcium phosphate, and then we'll inject it through. And then that calcium phosphate, calcium sulfate mixture, I would choose calcium phosphate, calcium sulfate because it actually resorbs over time. But or for a diabetic patient, you can inject calcium sulfate, which is just chalk. It's been used for 150 years in the body. Mix it with antibiotics. It's on the shelf for $200. Inject it through the device, and now you have the opportunity to protect the hardware in the most costly orthopedic procedure there is currently. And so, other than customs and oncology, and then we evolve eventually into the standard of care. And now we get to oncology. So this is where it becomes really fun. Osteoporosis, we've described how drawing the stem cells in can help create a biological ripple effect and increase bone mineral density around the screw and stabilize the screw. And we talked about calcium sulfate mixed with antibiotics, injecting it through the device and protecting the screw from infections. And that protects the surgeon, the hospital, the patient, and the caregivers. Now, oncology, this is the fun part. Oncology, I have a dad that has a tumor in his spine right now, actually, and we aren't going to do anything. There's not really a lot of options other than radiation. But with these advanced polymers that are coming to market, there's a beautiful opportunity for us to partner with research labs and inject oncological products and test them. So anybody that wants to partner, we would love the opportunity to partner. We'll provide the hardware for free. So us versus the competition, you'll notice the competition's just smooth and shiny. That's the competition. That's it. We reduce macro and micro changes, macro and micro motion based off of the design of the implant and the titanium trabecular pattern. We have the ability to prevent infection. They do not. Our porosity is comparable with commensurate with local bone, and there's no additional cost. We plan on submitting to the FDA within the next month or two, so it's very exciting. And we plan on launching around our first initial soft launch at a few teaching institutions. I'll move on to our very fun key opinion leader team. We have WashU, Duke University, UCSF here, and Cox Health / University of Missouri. It's a very exciting time to have these gentlemen partner with us. They've partnered with me since day one. They literally showed up on Sunday afternoons for an hour every other week to help me write some grants. So we're really excited about this opportunity. Our advisory team is not going to show up, but so we'll just go. I'll stop my share. Thank you guys for having me. Thanks for being here, and I appreciate your time.
Okay, last but not the least, our speaker is Dean Hughes. He is let me just make sure I make an introduction right. He is the Regional Technical Director at Smith & Nephew Orthopedics. We're really honored to have him. So Dean, I'll let you take over here. You can just share screen here.
Yeah, share screen.
Yeah. Definitely a new skill to learn how to do hybrid. So awkward.
I did. I thought, yeah, that one.
Oh, you click on it. You gotta click. There you go. Oh, somebody give us a thumb up before you even present. Yay.
All right. Well, thanks, Jenny, for the opportunity. You know, I've been in the industry for quite a while, over 30 years, and most of it in knee and hip development. So I've been asked to give an overview from an industry perspective, from an engineering perspective, how to get new technology through big industry, I guess you call it. And, you know, at the end of the day, it is a challenge. You know, everyone's looking at stock price. Your competition's launching products. So from an engineering perspective, you've got to basically get it right quick, and get it right the first time with no revisions. So that's the challenge we all have, whether it's big company, small company, or whatnot. But from 3D printing, you know, it's new, but it's been around for quite a while. And if you take a look at from an engineering perspective, there's several things you look at, you know, coming from, you know, spine and knees or whatnot, making instruments for many years. It's always, you take a piece of bar and you just will it down until, you know, you get what you want or whatnot. And you call it floor stock, you call it, you know, basically whittling away a piece of bar or a piece of block. And you always have to look at, well, what tool you used, or what you know, what machine you needed, whether it's wire EDM, whether it's a grinder or something like that. With 3D printing, it just takes all that off the table. So it's very exciting when we started about 12 years ago, looking at areas in which we could apply this technology. And with that, you have to look at, okay, what kind of powders are out there, whether it's Ti-64, whether it's cobalt chrome, whether it's zirconium, whether it is, you know, stainless steel or whatnot. Then you have to obviously look at the machines that are available. It has to be cost effective. It has to be quick. It has to be fast. It has to be consistent. So all that taken consideration, we were looking at it about 12 years ago, and we realized that the porous market was taking off. Hips and knees over time and projected to grow, as you can see, year over year, with a CAGR that's probably 12 to 15% year over year. So we looked at, hey, if we can print Conceloc structure, we call it Conceloc as our trade name. It's pretty much the industry was chasing what we call Implex or trabecular metal in the early days, probably 20, 25 years ago. That was the gold standard. It was growing in bone like crazy. And one of the things with any ingrowth structure, you can't test it in the lab. You have to go to sheep, canine, or whatnot, and develop your own models to have confidence as an engineer that you put this in humans, it's going to work. So with that, we said, okay, we're going after the porous market. So the first thing we did, I hired the smartest person I could find. His name is Ron Landon. I said, write me a math equation that will give me a random structure that no one else has in the world. And he did, and we patented that. So the Conceloc structure you'll see in the booth tomorrow is patented. It's a randomized basic structure. It's a mathematical equation behind that, believe it or not. So that's what we started with. And basically the history, we started printing off solids. And one of the first things that I learned, it took me a while, but all these solids is not really a solid. And if you take and you look at the scanning electron microscope, it has pores. And how those pores arrive in that structure is random. And this affects the strength of the material. And you'll find out later what we did with that. So obviously we can print the 3D structure, and we evaluated that many months, years. And then we selected the machinery. We looked at E-beam, we looked at laser, and we selected the best machine we could at the time that was available. And we've since added to that machinery. And you can see there, we did animal models. We have a subarticular model that we use where we actually implant that in sheep. So we get a loading effect on the disc that is beneath the subarticulation of that sheep. And then we harvest that to see if bone grew into it. Early on, also we looked at SLS type machines similar to SLA material, where we did patient-specific cutting blocks, as Kareem was talking about. One of the things you'll notice here from the tibia base plate, early days that we printed base plates that had holes in them. Well, surgeons actually put screws to hold the base plate down. They no longer wanted to do that. So this all fed into the press fit of our tibia base plate. So from a basically design standpoint, we started with cups in the early days, a Conceloc structure, fully 3D printed as tabular cups. We also had augments for revision. And you'll see those in the booth tomorrow if you go to the Academy meeting for orthopedic surgeons. And this was our first foray into the 3D printing space. But the actual Conceloc structure, as I said, it was basically targeted for more or less the trabecular metal market because at the time the state of the art was beads, which if you look at a beaded surface, it's just round cobalt chrome or titanium beads, which is essentially the negative of a Conceloc or cancellous bone. And this was new to us. So we're printing things that look like cancellous bone. What will bone grow into Conceloc or cancellous structure? Well, we had, clinical reports that trabecular metal was doing well. So we went full steam ahead, porosity about 80%, and you can see the pore size there to match. And this is just a benchmark of where our competition was. We obviously either we scan or we locate these devices and basically benchmark our device against those. So we fell in that range where we felt pretty comfortable that our device was going to be clinically successful. So from a manufacturing standpoint, as I said earlier, we looked at fully 3D printing the base plate, and there were random porosity into the solids as you basically flip the base plate over and machine your lock detail for accepting of the polyethylene. And we found porosity, and random fatigue testing showed that this was not going to be successful for us. So what we did is what we called a hybrid, where we took a raw titanium and put this in our basically our DLS machine, and basically printed on top of that base plate. And as you see there, the keel, the pegs, and all of that is fully 3D printed, as well as the Conceloc structure. On the hip side, it's fully basically fully added to manufacturing our patella and our cups. So this, you see a little bit of close-up picture of a in-process base plate. As it comes off the machine, it is a pure wrought material with the Conceloc base plate basically ready to be machined for the lock detail. You'll notice here, you'll see the little bumps and such on the Conceloc structure that helps with osteointegration. So those are also printed onto the Conceloc structure. It's very difficult to see without magnification. This is the most important part. And as you'll see, and to me, any design that you have from especially a bone-in growth, it can't break and it can't loosen. Those are the two main things. So during our testing, as I said, we basically validate the fact the base plate met the standards of the ASTM type standards. I will tell you that we had to go back and redesign some things to make it stronger. And we did that, and we were able to do that in record time because the industry or our management realized over the years, we've been working with forgings and castings, no longer have to do that. So the speed and the turnaround of the design is really nice from an engineering standpoint. So this is our knee products today. We are looking at different areas for our femoral component. Right now, we still have a beaded femoral component, and our patella is 3D printed, fully 3D printed, as well as that's a hybrid for our base plate. So you see a little bit more of a close-up. It's 1 millimeter thick, a Concelloc or Cancellous type structure underneath the surface. And that's printed on the raw material. And here's the porosity that I mentioned earlier. A little bit closer look. As I said earlier, I grew up in the industry where the surgeons just put screws in the base plate. Well, those were no longer going to be something that the surgeons wanted, because that would be what we call osteolysis tracts, and loosening. The base plate would loosen over time as a polyethylene would wear into the base plate. So there was no screws. So at surgery at T = 0, that base plate had to be very solid. So we get a press fit. We also get these very sharp corners that would be impossible to machine, that actually act as anti-rotation devices, if you will, that basically along the keel to help with initial fixation. And this is our patella. We basically 3D print the patella. We do print a solid substructure, 3D printed material that was completely Concelloc structure, was not strong enough in the peg shear during testing. So we had to go back, basically underneath this surface, it's solid, and then Concelloc structure on top. Then we go in and we compression mold the polyethylene on top, round and oval. So jumping into the hips is again, acetabular structure, multi-hold and segments are very popular, and this is for revision cases. The beauty here is that we place strengthening structures within the Concelloc structure to actually have a very strong base for screws and for fixation in revision cases. There are multi-holes and no-hole shells that we make. A patented star structure here is that we can actually lock with a screw the acetabular cup into a revision type of situation. And again, we can go back and we can either have it fully 3D printed and porous through and through. A surgeon will cement into that, or polar cup, or we can actually go in and machine that surface and have it basically a situation where we put an oxenium cup or a polyethylene cup into that surface for dual mobility applications. Here again, we test the screws and the strength, very rigid and very capable of locking the cup into the acetabulum. And one thing I want to speak of that we've been doing for about 12 years now, we first launched this with our SLS type technology and did the very same thing that we spoke about earlier, where we take MRIs and we call these patient-specific cutting guides. About 20% of our knees go in today with what we call Visionaire. It's patient-specific cutting guides that matches the anatomy of the patient. We take an MRI and a standing X-ray and then stitch those together. It is, I would call it semi-automated. I was talking earlier that we can make some improvements here, but we do have various steps that are automated. MRI to basically virtual implantation. We have engineers that actually go in with the surgeon's guidance and actually place the implants where the surgeon likes the implants, and then create the guides, and then you have the final surgery. And that's what it looks like of the distal femur and proximal tibia. So really, in summary, we have applied this technology and fortunate enough to have many years of success with it on the hip and the knee side, as well as patient-specific guides. So we've used it across the spectrum. But I will caution that, as we go forward in design, just make sure that the strength and fatigue properties, the goals are there. But I'm also eager to see, and we have plans to implement other things as we go forward that we may be able to talk about in the break.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, this is gonna be fun. Now we're gonna do QA hybrid format. We're gonna start with virtual questions and Craig, you're gonna pass your computer around when speakers are answering questions. All right, well, some hellos. All right, Devin from. I don't even, you guys can read it. And then also question, okay, there's a question here, 3D printed parts. Any issue with shear strength of 3D printed parts? Shear strength. That does not, I'm not really sure what that is. Maybe you guys can, but we have a couple questions. Oh my God, this one person has, let's see, anything that's relevant here.
So I think question number 2, my name came up, but Alyssa was using my computer, so it was probably intended for her.
Oh.
What was the question? Let's see.
The question is, does the pedicle screw pass in the mechanical testing? How good is the osseo integration? So in mechanical testing, this is a 510K for us. And for the pedicle screw. For the circulate adapter, which is the lure lock that connects with the syringe, that's we're determining whether or not we go 510K or breakthrough designation. With the 510K, you have the typical ASTM standards that you have to meet to be on the market, and it has to be applicable to the predicate device. So you have to meet ASTM 1717, 1798, that has to meet 5 million cycles. We have 543, and because it's 3D printed, we have additional fatigue testing and microparticulate issues. So we get the full gamut of testing on top of the full gamut of testing. And then the first question was for Hymed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for everyone here that can't read the question, it says, I have a question for Hymed. Typical conventional medical device companies still don't believe in the additive manufacturing technique. It does not provide required surface finish and required machining for the final product. How far has Hymed gone for bulk production with additive manufacturing? Is it feasible in terms of costing, as it's still a headache to convert people in this technique? So this question was submitted after I spoke, but I think Dean, your talk kind of showed,
Yeah.
a real life, example from start to finish. So I'm going to throw it to you if you'd like to answer.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, it's got to meet, cost requirements and things of that nature. But yeah, I mean, it is something that has to go along with the design. I mean, and the machine you pick is very important, the speed, the consistency. It's got to meet the parameters of the testing and the goals of the company, and as far as volumes and things of that nature, to meet the inventory demands. But yeah, I mean, it's fully embraced, and it's how you sell it. I mean, at the end of the day, if you have there's a porous market out there, and we knew it, and we were not in it, and we were more or less playing, I would say, not catch up, but at the end of the day, there was very good competitive devices that were taking market share. And we knew we had to, address that in the most, expeditious way and safe way we could. So, yeah, I think orthopedic companies, if they're serious, they better embrace or have already embraced this technology.
I definitely think that's true. I mean, 7 years ago, when I just started to get interested in 3D printing, I didn't know anybody in my circle was getting something that's implanted that was 3D printed. And now I do.
Sure.
And they're very happy about it. So it's almost every single company, the big 5 has 3D printed products. So anyways, let's see. There is a question about material for Hymed.
Can I ask a follow-up question on
Oh, we can't record you,
that? Oh, okay.
but we will remember this question and okay, just right after this.
Okay.
You want to answer your
Sure.
material question?
So another question from Devin. Devin asks, he said, there are still few requirements where particular ASTM standards and grade material are required to produce hip and knee implants and devices. Until now, I am not able to find any similar materials with additive manufacturing. Would you be open to discuss these materials? So I'm not exactly sure if Devin is referring to the bioceramic materials that I was talking about towards the end, or the titanium devices. Pertaining to titanium acetabular cups, you know, you started talking about this. I mean, Tabor abrasion testing, for example, is something that's very important, ASTM F1978. And, you know, whether it's a porous plasma spray coating or an additive manufacturing process, the rules still need to be abided by. And
Pass the test, yeah.
exactly. And that's always a challenge. But you need to pass the test.
Okay, one last question from the virtual audience is for Dean, I believe, and you don't have to answer it if you can't, are you guys considering osteobiologics or antibiotics material in 3D printed hip or knee joints?
Sure.
Okay, considering is
of
okay.
course.
Yeah.
But we need to talk, Dean.
Yeah.
All right, guys, thank you so much for joining virtually. We're gonna say bye here.